systems nominal.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the show. So, two things today. First up, Heavy Gear 3 just got announced out of nowhere a couple of days ago. I am goddamn hyped, as you can imagine. I already covered the first two games. A big fan of those, and glad to see some advancement on that front. Definitely bet your ass I'm going to be checking that out when it releases. Secondly, and slightly more on topic for today's video, I got something here to show you all. This is a 1/35th scale model of a PKH 103A Nutcracker, or Nutrocker, depending on your preferred translation, of course. It is an autonomous hunter-killer drone hover tank developed from the SPH-69 hover truck by the fine folks over at the Nibelungen Arms Factory for the Strahl Democratic Republic. It comes out in 2884 for their war against the IMA. It comes with a pair of really nasty 60mm laser cannons. It's their 859 PS engine. Get this thing up to 95 kilometers per hour. Effective range of 4,200 kilometers. So, yeah, it goes a good distance. And a combination of tungsten and special heat-proof ceramic armor makes it one tough little son of a bitch, I'll tell you. Now, chances are that if any of that made any sense to you at all, it's because you already have at least a passing knowledge of today's subject matter. For all the rest of you wondering what the fuck I'm talking about, well, buckle up because you're about to get an education. So, what the hell is Maschinen Krieger? Maschinen Krieger is the brainchild of one Kow Yokoyama, or Hiroshi Yokoyama. I've seen him referred to both ways. He's a Japanese artist, sculptor, and big-time scale model enthusiast with a very distinctive style whose design work can be found in anime. He's worked on Big Wars, Venus Wars. He did the concept art for that motorcycle with a railgun in that one. Cool stuff. Video games. He used one of the main designers on Phantom Crash for the Xbox, Xanadu, Carnage Hearts. Did a lot of artwork for that. He also worked on the Wanzer designs in the original Front Mission. If you've ever seen that book from Huffman, that includes a lot of his model work for that. It's really, really good stuff. He even worked on a very Jean-Giro Moebius-looking Cindy Crawford starring commercial for something called Pocardi Sweat. Yeah, I have no idea. Japan's going to Japan, but she looks like she enjoys drinking. Who am I to complain, right? Anyway, Cow's art style has a very rough, gritty, grounded feel to it, even at its most fantastical in certain places, both in his illustrations and, of course, in his models, which back in the early 80s stood out compared to a lot of the sci-fi model kits that were around at the time. This is really when the full real robot, realistic mecha kind of thing was really getting started. So this is one of the forebears of that, at least in the modeling scene. And so, when an early version of what would end up being called an armored fighting suit, or AFS, showed up in the pages of Hobby Japan magazine in, I think it was April or May of 1982, well, people took notice, that's for sure. In fact, the magazine's readership liked it so much that it became a regular feature called SF3D Original. It's a play on words for SF Sunday, from what I understand. It's the way it's pronounced in Japanese. From 1982 to 1985, Hobby Japan would feature monthly installments of this series. You'd get a combination of scratch-built model dioramas and artwork from Kow, alongside story written by Hiroshi Ishimura and graphic design by Kunitaka Imai. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Among other contributors, or a bunch of people on the team that came with for this. There'd also be kind of behind-the-scenes guides and stuff like that, showing how Kow assembled all these powered armor suits, mechs, and vehicles he was creating from parts of old World War II model kits, action figures. The first AFS had a little Microman figure as its basis. And any other bits and bobs he had available, like spoons, lots of ping pong balls went into this, whatever he had to have. It's really showing off the DIY nature of the project, showing that off. From there, SF3D grew in popularity. There was a company called Nitto, Nitto, that got the license to sell the model kits based on the series. There were about 21 in all. And let's see, Hobby Japan published an SF3D Chit and Hex war game designed by a guy named Yasunori Sekiyama. There were actually some video games based on that for the PC-88 too. There was even a 30-minute short film released in 85 called SF3D Original Nutcracker, which was filmed in English for whatever reason and featured both stop motion using the actual models as well as live action segments from the perspective of the guy inside the armor, which is honestly pretty cool. it's kind of like that whole, what you do nowadays with the Marvel stuff when you have us seeing the actor's face inside the Iron Man suit, Only this was done back in the 80s. It's honestly really cool. You should probably check it out at least once. The link will be in the description. It's available on YouTube in full, so you can check it out at your leisure. Unfortunately, that would be about it for SF3D, as it turns out, because by 1986, there was some kind of legal issue regarding ownership of the property. The team kind of broken up and go do their own thing, and the series just stopped. No more kits, no more stories. It was over. Well, okay, not exactly over. In the intervening years, Kow would continue to do work on many different projects, and some of them kind of touching on this. During this time, he published a serialized story in a magazine called Comic Noisy, titled Maschinen Krieger Blechmann, which I think is translates to Maschinen Krieger Tin Man or something like that. The first time that name, Maschinen Krieger, would appear anywhere here related to this. There was also another story related to that one called Robot Battle 5, published in the video game magazine Login, also featuring similar kinds of powered armor that we would see there. It would take a few years of legal wrangling, but eventually, in the late 90s, early 2000s, Mr. Yokoyama would regain the rights to all of the SF3D content, now under this new name of Maschinen Krieger that continues to this day. I mean, there are new articles which appear in magazines like Model Graphics over the years. Model kits are back in production, including new ones from several companies, Wave and Hasegawa being the main ones. The Nutcracker here is a Hasegawa one. Oop, there we go. Yeah. Hasegawa Hobby Kits right there. It's a nice beauty. Yeah, I love the classic box design that's been retained throughout the entire duration of this whole thing. See, yeah, so Wave and Hasegawa being the main ones doing this. Kow did a series of graphic novel style stories for Play Online magazine between 1999 and 2001, so there's that as well. There's even 15mm minis for all the wargamers out there, courtesy of, let's see, make sure you can see that, Slave 2 Gaming, so the company in Australia. This one's a mercenary Super Jerry Heavy AFS or HAFS. Got all the little chicken walkers. Comes with a bunch of, missile launchers, frontal laser cannon, nasty little bastard. That was fun to make. So that's the kind of the real world history of Maschinen Krieger in a nutshell. But what's the actual story of Maschinen Krieger? What's the setting? Well, that's a little complicated since there's not so much a canon story to it as a history of events, people, technologies that was told through magazine articles, description on model kit boxes, the occasional book here. Like, some of the info is actually on the painting guide. So if you look here, if you actually translate this part into Japanese, it actually gives you unit information on certain battles and stuff like that. It's like looking for the item descriptions in Dark Souls and seeing, to try and get some idea what the hell the story is. Like, seriously, try imagining you're back in the 80s, early 90s, trying to piece all this together before the internet was even a thing. Now try doing it from another country with limited access to the source materials and in a language that you don't understand. And when by some miracle it is in English, such as when the 20th Century Imports actually did a translation of the war game, the SF3D original war game, it turns out they changed some background info and other stuff for whatever reason. So, like, it's now, okay, which version is actually true? I mean, that's the whole thing, right? And you wouldn't be able to check up on it back then anyway. Suffice to say, I am very, very grateful that in the intervening decades, the fan base of SF3D and Ma.K, Maschinen Krieger, have done an incredible job consolidating so much of it into something coherent. A special mention as well goes to some books I picked up. There we go. So these here are the Maschinen Krieger Chronicle and Encyclopedia, volumes 1 and 2. Do a great job covering the setting in very, very good detail. The first one is from 2882 to 2885. Second one from 85 to 87. So it covers the entire breadth of the conflict there. And also here, I've got Maschinen Krieger in Action Bande Dessinée, which compiles all the Play Online comics I mentioned previously into one book, covering events throughout the war. So, all written and illustrated by Kow Yokoyama himself. It's really good stuff. There's also a compilation of all the original Hobby Japan stories, but I haven't been able to get that It's either out of stock whenever I look or on eBay, but for way too much. Like, even I'm not that obsessed. Anyway, I should probably get to the actual fucking story at some point, so here we go. In 2807, World War IV breaks out. No mention of when World War III happened. And over the next 3 years, 80% of the world's population is dead. The planet itself has been nuked halfway to hell. It's a complete mess. But luckily, at this point, Earth is no longer the only place humanity calls home. There's a whole galactic federation made of multiple interstellar states out there, and the survivors are moved off world. So there's nearly a half century that goes by. Life goes on for everybody until a survey team checks up on Altera for a minute and discovers that the environment is actually recovering way better than anyone expected. By 2859, colonization teams begin returning to Earth, settling in the more hospitable regions, notably Australia, although Canada is mentioned as well, so go us. Things are pretty rough at first, as you can imagine, but the colonists gradually manage to rebuild infrastructure, start farming, take the first steps to repopulating our home planet. But then more people start to arrive, people more interested in taking advantage of the situation than making things better for everybody, because of course, you got outlaws, criminals, mercenaries, you get deserters from various interstellar militaries, and full-out terrorists looking to hide out in the colonies from the authorities. They all make a beeline for Earth and gradually start to make things go to shit. Yeah, you have the cities and towns are sprouting up and civilizations beginning to return, but crime is becoming an epidemic as a result of this. And the local colonial militias just aren't up to the task of dealing with the situation, unfortunately. So seeing this, in 2877, the Federation tasks one of its member states, the Strahl Democratic Republic, or Demokratische Republik, they're German, to handle the crisis on account of their superior military and policing capabilities. They're pretty good at this stuff. They proceed to send 3 army police battalions, supported by 3 mercenary-composed Foreign Legion battalions, to retake control of the situation and return order to Earth. Which they actually do. I mean, quite efficiently, in fact, a bit too efficiently, actually. See, the Strahl are basically space Germans in the you will follow the rules or you will be disciplined type, very anal about the whole law and order thing. So, yeah, they do stop the crime and the chaos, but in a very heavy-handed way. Lots of restrictions on personal freedoms, movement, harsh punishments for any wrongdoing. There's not much leeway allowed. They're very Prussian about the whole thing. This, as you can imagine, ends up pissing off the colonists who really resent this treatment, being, frontier-type people used to being left alone for the most part, resulting in terrorist attacks on the Strahl Army in 2880, which makes the army crack down harder, which results in the colonists finally deciding they've had enough, forming the Earth Independent Provisional Government in 2882 and declaring formal independence from the Galactic Federation. A bit much, but, colonists going to colonize. In response, the Strahl Army sets up their own loyalist government, because, hey, you're not supposed to leave, what the hell, and starts cracking down on the rebellion, to which they respond by hiring mercenaries, many of whom had been among those that caused them so much trouble to begin with, ironically, and create the Independent Mercenary Army, or IMA, to take on the Strahl Republic. This included most, if not all, of the Strahl Army's foreign legions stationed on Earth, as it turns out, who decided the benefits were too good to pass up and joined up with their fellow mercs, taking all their weapons, gear, and vehicles along with them. Like, they just raided the garrisons, which ended up giving the IMA a serious shot in the arm for this initial part of the conflict. At this point, the SDR are in very big trouble, and they call in the big guns. Like, the actual Strahl Army, not just the police detachments. The 7th Armored Mobile Infantry Division lands in Western Australia on the 25th of September, 2882, sets up a bridgehead for additional reinforcements, and from that point, it is on. From 2882 until 2887, war will rage across the planet, with both sides ramping up their technology and tactics as they go along to try and gain the advantage, starting with the colonists with the invention of the AFS, the armored fighting suits, in 83, the ones I mentioned previously from that initial SF3D article in Hobby Japan. These are powered armor that gave each infantryman the durability and firepower of a small armored vehicle. So, in response, the SDR would develop their own suits, such as this one right here. This is the PKAM Melusine, It's a thing of beauty right there. Gotta love that, arm-mounted laser cannon right there. Good, beautiful stuff. I've also got a PKG Gustav suit, but I haven't had time to build that one quite yet. Got busy. Now, that was just a quick overview of the Maschinen Krieger setting, and already I can imagine some of you feeling a bit overwhelmed, but bear with me because ultimately all this background exists solely to justify a bunch of cool sci-fi war machines with World War II paint jobs blowing the crap out of each other with lasers. The depth is there if you're a massive nerd like me and you really enjoy getting into the weeds, but there's also a lot of blank space left over with some things just left completely unexplored. Like, what's the Galactic Federation like? What's happening outside the Earth Independence War? What kind of thing? That kind of thing. Hell, we don't even know what these suits actually run on. It could be like a microfusion reactor somewhere, or it could be batteries, big capacitors. They could be just regular gas guzzlers for all we know. This could be like a whole exhaust port right there. It just wasn't the focus when Kow and company dreamt these things up. They were artists, not engineers. Although, there's actually some debate as to where the arms go into these things. Like the video, the Nutrocker video, shows the pilot getting an arm blown off, but he doesn't complain about, oh my god, my arm got blown off. So it's kind of hard to see, what was exactly canon and what wasn't, because things were still, up in the air so much. Which isn't to say that there wasn't a lot of thought put into it. Now, obviously there was. You probably noticed from what I described so far how much of this setting is based in action and reaction. There's a sense of, and then because of this, that happened. There's a logical feel to the events as they unfold, with both sides of the war attempting to counter each other's moves in a way that feels very believable. Like the Nutcracker, for instance. It was actually introduced as a stopgap to deal with the IMA suits while the PKA series was still being developed, only for it to work well beyond their expectations, in spite of some design flaws, like the air intake on the hover system not liking the Australian outback very much. Also, the lasers, not exactly best for humid environments. It causes, lack of accuracy, which is why this is the PKH 103A. The PKH 103B ends up with a big old, autocannon on it instead of the lasers for dealing with that kind of stuff. And the IMA, seeing that this thing was a serious threat, introduced new weapons like the Y615 Dollhouse missile tank, and eventually an upgraded version of their suit, the SFAS, the Super Armored Fighting Suit. Again, move, counter move. It helps make the setting feel very believable to me. It also means that you have a gradual escalation, just as you can see in histories of World War I or World War II. Things build up over time. There's a whole family tree of vehicles, specialized variants, and prototypes reflecting how the IMA and SDR approached the war, both on Earth and in space, how they adjusted for changing circumstances. Like the Strahl relying strongly on autonomous combat drones because they don't have the most manpower on site and don't want to risk too many casualties, so they rely on a lot of robots. Or how neither side even contemplates WMDs at all, because the whole reason any of them are on Earth to begin with is because it just bounced back from a thermonuclear holocaust. No one wants any more new suns rising anywhere they shouldn't be, That also brings to mind that the IMA and the SDR, they're not just rehashes of their historical inspirations, in spite of the paint job. This isn't plucky colonial allies versus space Nazis, not at all. In many ways, I'd honestly say that the situation the Strahl are in reminds me a lot of more recent wars. It's not a one-to-one analogy, obviously. This was created 20 years before the GWAT was ever a thing, but the idea of a democratic republic, because nothing leads me to believe that the Strahl aren't actually a democratic republic, as opposed to, the Democratic Republic of, North Korea or something like that, where it's just, a name doesn't actually mean anything. Here, there's nothing to say otherwise. So we have this democratic republic at war with a largely guerrilla force in a place they ostensibly went to help. Perhaps they thought they'd be greeted as liberators, who knows? With drone warfare being a primary focus. I mean, it does sound vaguely familiar for 2025, doesn't it, And as for the mercenaries, the IMA side, things often don't go their way. They have a tendency to get overconfident at times, launch these large operations, like, for example, Operation Super Hammer is a big one early on, that either go completely wrong for various reasons or result in Pyrrhic victories where the mission is accomplished, but at a high at so high a cost that it prevents them from making additional long-term gains. It becomes almost a battle of attrition like that. And sometimes there are serious unexpected consequences. Don't get me started on Operation Icebreaker near the end of the war in 28 87, 86, 87. That one, ooh boy, that's caused problems going forward. They seem to do a lot much better when they try and be sneaky as a guerrilla force, try to use deception and diversion and, subversive tactics instead of going head to head with the enemy in pitched battles, It's kind of reminds me a bit of how, the Romans dealt with Hannibal in the end, because every time they tried to go, head to head, they got curb stomped. It's only when they started, actually thinking about their tactics that they actually started winning. Plus, they're mercs, so strategy can sometimes be a lower priority than we'll get them the best payday, obviously. Suffice to say, it's not a black and white kind of conflict, though you might, as much as you might imagine. Anyway, I'm going on and on about the background detail and kind of forgetting about one of the main things that attracts a lot of people to Maschinen Krieger, and that's the look of it. I mean, for my part, I got into this looking up images for the Panzerkleins from the Silent Storm games. If you ever remember, I ever played those. Coming across some of Kow Yokoyama's artwork and thinking, wow, what's all this about? It's the combination of both smooth, curved surfaces with exposed wires, tubes, and mechanical elements, along with that World War era flavor, that kind of retro futuristic aesthetic. I guess you call it diesel punk, but to me that relates more to settings based in the 1920s, 30s with sci-fi tech. This is, I'd say it's more akin to something like Star Wars, which obviously was a big influence. You look at the walkers and you can kind of see some ATSTs in there. But, taking obvious inspiration from that period, but doing its own thing with it, Also, like Star Wars, at least the originals anyway, I have nothing to say about the prequels and the sequels at this point. Maschinen Krieger has that worn down, used future look to it. You know what I mean? Part of it is the paint jobs people choose. Lots of weathering and rusty looking washes, dirt under the treads, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Part of it's also, again, that World War II inspiration, despite the fact that it's the 29th century. And we're dealing with robots, lasers, anti-grav flying machines, that kind of thing. It feels old, like something out of a period war movie of sorts. In fact, if they ever do get a movie going like they've been threatening to since a few years back, actually, I'd say that's the look and feel they should be going for. Imagine Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers with powered armor and mechs. Tell me you wouldn't watch that. Come on. And thus far, we've only talked about the official stuff, right? There's also a wealth of fan-made stuff inspired by the Maschinen Krieger universe, ranging from variants on existing vehicles, mashups of different things to create something new, or based on Yokoyama illustrations that never had models made to begin with, all the way to brand new creations that fit right in next to the originals, along with some stuff that's just, crazy flights of fancy that still somehow you tell are related to it. I think one of the things that contributes to this kind of, explosion of creativity like that is the fact that there's so much empty space to fill in the setting. Due to the canon being vague and open in many places, it encourages that kind of, imagination with regards to that. Plus the fact that there's the whole thing has its roots in that DIY culture, garage kit culture, going back all the way to the earliest SF3D stuff in the 80s. I mean, that's without going into the vast amount of artists who were also influenced by Yokoyama's art. I mean, whether it's contemporaries of his like Makoto Kobayashi, who actually worked on the original SF3D run with him on back in the Hobby Japan days. He would known, but I think probably known for anime people for Dragon's Heaven. If you ever seen that one, definitely worth checking out. That. Let's see. You have the makers of the video game Hawken, who flat out said that they were heavily influenced by Maschinen Krieger for their mech designs. And yeah, for the Metal Gear fans out there, take a look at the TX55 and Metal Gear D from the first two games in that series. Kind of familiar looking, wouldn't you say? I mean, especially D. Somebody definitely had a few model kits on hand for inspiration for that one there. So, in conclusion, because I've been going on quite a bit for this, if you've ever thought about getting into this particular niche of the sci-fi modeling hobby, then you are in very good company. There's a bunch of groups on various social media platforms, Facebook, Reddit, you name it, where people are sharing their builds, so you can check that out for inspiration or just to show off some stuff. The Maschinen Krieger pronounced Maschinen Krieger forums are a good place to go as well. There's Lincoln Wright of Paint on Plastic, who's written a few guides to Mac that are well worth looking at. On the gaming side, the company making those miniatures I talked about, Slave to Gaming, are currently working on a 15mm scale Maschinen Krieger war game, which is looking very interesting, so check that out. And if you're old school, there's an SF3D gaming website that collated and expanded on the old Hexspace war game too. So lots of good reference material there. It was probably my first introduction once I started looking into deeper. That's where I found a whole bunch of starting info. Very good place to look. I'll have links for all this stuff in the description, so don't worry about that. The books and model kits are available online in various places, usually from Japan, but not always. I mean, I got my Nutcracker there via Argama Hobby out of Toronto. So check with your local stores. You never know which might be available. So I for one, definitely think there's a lot of great stuff here that whether you're like me and will buy the damn encyclopedia to learn every available detail, or if you just like building Panzer-themed hovercraft in your spare time, I think Maschinen Krieger is well worth a look. It's got its own vibe to it that I don't think has been exactly replicated anywhere else, even with other sci-fi properties that take a lot of World War II inspiration and stuff like that, or in the more diesel punk stuff where it's 1920s and 1930s done in the sci-fi way. This has very much that SF3D original kind of feel to it. There's nothing else quite like it. And so I highly recommend checking it out. I have been Zero Sum. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe all you want. I have a little Gustav to go build, so I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
All primary objectives complete. Mission successful.